Awesome.
Okay, so let's get started. I am Susan Seto. I am a Senior Vice President of Market Strategy Group at Environics Research. I've spent my whole career at Environics working with social values, so I'm very excited to discuss with Alanna, but also share with the rest of the audience as to how social values inform the learner mindsets and the education space in particular. And I've also done quite a bit of work in the higher education space as well.
Awesome. And I'm Alanna Sawatzky. I'm Senior Research Associate on the Public Affairs team at Environics Research. And so this is our third episode of the Social Values Compass. I believe you were at the first one or two. So this episode we're focusing on, it's called Learner Lens. So we're focusing on the application of social values to education or to learners in general. We're all learners, whether formal or informal or through our work. So we're going to explore the different ways that we can connect Environics social values with these learner mindsets.
And just to give a reminder for those who are not familiar with social values, because we will be spending quite a bit of time unpacking what some of those values are. Social values are, if you think of them as those deep innermost motivations and psychographics, it's really a person's fundamental worldview that sets the context for how they interact with the world, they see situations, relate to others, take on opportunities and challenges, and engage with events and other kinds of things. And so they are formed early on in life. We've been tracking social values in North America for more than 4 decades, but they're formed early on in life. And they tend to be fixed by your mid-teens, so into early adulthood. They are shaped by one's upbringing, which is very important to know. So upbringing, family life, your schooling, your community, as well as cultural influences. And education actually is one of the things that do have somewhat of an influence in terms of informing some of your values as you progress through life as well, which is really, really interesting. But again, they're very, very important to understand in many, many different contexts. Very important to understand because you can see things on the surface, right? You can see the behaviors of learners, the actions they take, what they might look like, how they move around the world or within the school. And then when you peel back some of those layers, you might be able to understand through various means their attitudes, their needs, which we want to understand too to make sure we're addressing. But then underneath that are the social values, those fundamental motivations that really inform how they're going to engage with education, the types of programs, the types of institutions, the type of services and amenities and community that they're going to be seeking out.
Awesome. Okay. And so in terms of looking at those different learner types, so what do we mean when we say learner mindset or learner type? So a learner mindset, the way I've been thinking about it is the way someone approaches learning in general. This can be from early learning all the way through to post-secondary and beyond. As you're saying, it relates to those motivations, what drives people, and especially how they face challenges, how they develop skills. So we can even see it later on in life when you're looking at professional development opportunities or a challenge at work that you need to solve. So really looking at those different types of learner segments, kind of. So I know there's many different types of learner mindsets.
Yes, there are many types of learner mindsets. So I think that's the most important to establish overall, right? Because in many instances, you might view your audiences or student groups as, this is the type of program that they're in. This is the school that they're in. But within that, there are very, very critical key differences that you need to understand. So whether that's in early education through post-secondary and later on in life too, there are very, very different learner mindsets that exist out there. And, I think we have a visual up on the screen that kind of anchors the opposite ends of the spectrum of what the types of learner mindsets that we might expect to see. So, what's depicted by the mountain is a learner that's more oriented towards, climbing a peak. They're goal oriented, they're achievement oriented, a little bit more pragmatic maybe, and maybe a little bit more linear in terms of the type of learning or pathway that they're progressing along. They may be trying to climb one mountain It may be many, many mountains throughout their lifetime. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have what's being depicted by a sponge. Kind of reminds me a little bit of SpongeBob. But, so we got the sponge, and the sponge, if you know, if you're working with a sponge, it's something that's soaking things in. It's absorbing. So this is a very kind of intrinsic curiosity-minded type of learner that's really just out there absorbing all sorts of ideas, knowledge, information through all aspects of their life, and they're just constantly looking for learning wherever they can find it.
And that sponge, when you bring up that sponge learner, and I think back to the question that we asked at the beginning, the sponge learner mindset they may not have had the response to our, what was your favorite subject? Because they're excited by so many different things, so many different topics. It may be hard to choose. They might be interested in going back to school later on. I know I see things my kids are learning and think, oh, I wish I'd studied that in higher ed, or where you start to just absorb everything around you, and so you're excited by that curiosity in general. May come out again, as I mentioned, in professional development, where they're seeing something they may not have learned about in the past, but a skill that they want to develop. And then so some of the other learner types that were coming to mind for me when we would first start talking about this was that I think I was calling it the connector, the networker learner. So the person who learns best in group settings. They love to collaborate. They love to get together with their colleagues, with their classmates, and that's how they learn best. Or that one who's the innovator, experimenting with things, right? And again, it all kind of comes back to those inner motivations and those values that you were talking about before. So it's all these different approaches, right, to learning that are rooted in those motivations and those whys, right? So why do people choose specific programs? Why do people choose a specific career path? How do they see themselves growing in the workplace? Those types of things.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand that this learner type of orientation might change for someone as they progress through life. But if you imagine, the sponge being, the 5-year-old or the 3-year-old child, and they start off with that sense of curiosity that's almost limitless. And then as some people grow up, you become a little bit more oriented towards the opposite end of the spectrum. Of course, there's many different learner types within. We just kind of depict the opposite ends of the spectrum, but some people carry on that kind of, endless, lifelong attitude and approach to learning with them.
So let's make the connection then, because we've talked about social values, we've talked about learner mindsets. How do we connect them? So we said social values are our fundamental values. They shape our worldview, our motivations, who we are. So what role do they play in shaping those learner mindsets and motivations? And I'll go back to something I always talk about when we talk about social values, and I think of how social values show us the why behind a specific behavior. I mean, us as researchers, we're always trying to look for that why. It's not enough for us to know what your favorite subject is. We want to know the why. And so one of the other fascinating things about social values and that whole why piece is people may make the same decision for different reasons, and it comes back to their values.
Yes. So again, going back to that onion slide, on the surface, you might see what institutions someone's attending, what programs they're in, the types of courses they're taking. That only tells one part of the story, right? Because as Alanna said, it's really understanding the differences within that are shaped and informed by the different values that are being held. So you could have a group of students in one program or in one school where they're holding very, very different values. And understanding those values is very, very critical, because that's going to help you be able to develop programming, develop services, develop amenities, developing recruitment and messaging, retention messages that's really going to connect to them on the things that matter related to education and learning, to be able to keep them there and be able to help them be successful.
One of the, just to illustrate that image of wanting the same thing for different reasons was, it was joining a student club or joining a the 5K to raise money, right? Where one person's doing it because they actually connect with the cause and they want to raise money and make a difference and contribute, where the other person's doing it because all their friends are doing it and they want to be part of that community, right? So they're both doing the 5K, but it's for different reasons and it's for different values. So how are you going to get that person to the 5K? That type of, I remember when that came up in a workshop one time, I found that to be a really compelling example of that.
Yeah. And so just even talk about some of the values that might be behind it, the different type of learner orientations that you might see. So let's say you have a group of students on a certain campus, and one group is kind of defined by the values that you see up here, which is, community involvement. Which is really about wanting to be interested in their community. They want to feel that sense of community. They want to be engaged and involved. They're interested in social learning, which is really about learning from the diversity perspectives in others, and pursuit of novelty. Really, it's like learning new ideas, having new experiences, and those kinds of things. So that type of an orientation really means that it's a group of students that you're going to find on that campus that's going to be more oriented or gravitating towards, various study groups. Maybe they'll be joining various clubs. Maybe they'll be leading a lot of initiatives, and looking for that diversity of perspectives and new ideas, because they're actually finding that to be an enriching part of their experience and education journey there. You might have another set that's kind of defined by values such as adaptive navigation, which is really being able to take on challenges and be able to navigate changes and complexities of life. Personal challenge, which is really kind of looking to meet challenges, to demonstrate that they're able to, so that sense of capability and perseverance, and having a sense of work ethic. So doing the things that they feel they should be doing, achieving their goals. Again, is a very different kind of learner mindset or orientation than what was depicted by the values in the previous slide. But this is a group or a student group that's much more goal oriented. They're looking for challenges. They're focused on achieving an end. And then, maybe another group might be defined by a set of values that we have up on the screen here. One being obedience to authority. So more likely to subscribe to, hierarchies, follow authority figures and those kinds of things, placing importance on brands, and having a need for status recognition, being very conscious of how they're displaying themselves to the world. So this is a learner group that might be much more likely to be following those conventional education pathways, right? Really wanting to understand and be gravitating towards institutions that have very strong brand reputation and recognition, and the types of associations that are going to be appealing to them to demonstrate, how they are succeeding in the world as well. So those different values and motivations behind learner groups really are going to help inform the types of needs, the expectations, as well as the relevant appeals that an institution might need to really get a hold on.
Just as you're talking, I'm trying to think, I was going to put you on the spot, but maybe I'll put myself on the spot.
That sounds good to me.
So I was going to say, okay, so which one of those, or those three sets, what's the sponge, to use our examples, what's the sponge, what's the mountain? Like for me, I'll put myself on the spot.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can debate too.
Yeah, that obedience to authority, like the third one, I guess, would be that mountain, right?
Yes,
probably.
Yes, that would be the mountain. It could the middle, the goal-oriented one could also be the mountain, right? Because the mountain is depicting you're climbing, maybe maybe the other group might be climbing Mount Everest, or they've got the checklist of key mountains to climb, right? And that one might be the more that third group that's following more of those conventional pathways. But that middle group is really kind of seeking taking on challenge. They're adaptive navigators. They have a strong work ethic. They could be climbing. They could be looking for obscure mountains. They could be, they're climbing the mountain for the mountain's sake.
And internal motivation.
Yes.
Whereas the third one, I feel like, would be more external, like they're doing it. Their parents are expecting them to climb that mountain. Or right there, just in terms of a need for status recognition and those types of things.
Which again, it's really important to tie back to how social values are formed. like early on in life,
Mhm.
shaped by your upbringing, your family life. So parents actually have a very critical role to play in terms of the values that you might hold, and then how that kind of shapes what you're looking for and the trajectory that you're going to take in the pursuit of learning and education.
And then honestly, the sponge kind of fits really neatly into the first one, like community involvement, social learning, right? Where you're in pursuit of novelty, especially. We didn't even put this, but they do. They fit right into it in terms of that curiosity and things like that. So now I'm trying to think, like, how would we, I guess, communicate with each of those different groups in a way that's different. And those are the types of things that we would kind of, when we talk about practical applications of social value. So each of those different groups are going to resonate with a message for a different reason, or they're going to resonate with different messages.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. With the first group being much more kind of socially oriented, diversity oriented, new and different perspectives oriented. In the middle group might be more ideas about, achievement, progression, advancement, but more for intrinsic reasons might be much more resonant. And then the last group that we kind of find, and these aren't the only three groups, right? I'm just painting some caricatures, but that group might, be, this is the top 3 universities and a very highly recognized program in this field, or whatever is going to lend them that kind of status.
But it's important to understand learners on that added level, though, because in my head I'm picturing someone I know, right, or in each of these things. But again, with social values, it's that deeper level of understanding someone beyond just demographics. Because I do feel like a lot of people, we say, okay, we have our traditional, we have our non-traditional. People put people in groups. Of course, a lot of it's based on those demographics, right? It's high school kids coming out and applying directly to university, or it's mature learners coming back to school to upskill. But knowing, which is great, and it's great to know who they are demographically, but adding that extra layer can kind of help to improve and communicate the value proposition, basically. Right?
Yeah. Because a lot of information that you may be collecting or understand about these learner groups already could be the demographics, could be their behaviors. If you're doing some research, it could be attitudes. You're already digging into that. But really, again, going back to that core, what's really motivating people behind all of their decisions and their actions, and how to be able to find a way to develop programming and developing offerings and developing communications that's really going to connect to them does require that understanding of those innermost held motivations and values.
Okay, so how do we do that? What are some concrete ways that we have?
There's many ways we can actually do it, but why don't we talk a little bit about how we've done it so far in the past? So it's kind of run the gamut, right? So we've incorporated social values into segmentation profiling. That's something we do with our social values, just standalone. So we have a lot of generational segmentation based on values. But we also have segmented student groups or learner groups, right, by their some specific criteria, but also including their values orientation to really help understand student groups, but not also alumni groups. So that way, things can be developed to really engage them and bring them further along the journey. We've also done a lot to unpack learner journeys and needs. And with amongst distinct groups, right? Because within an organization on a certain campus, even within a course, you're going to find different learner mindsets, different learner groups, and in many instances, the pathway or the journey that they've taken to get there, and the continuation of where the rest of the journey is going to take them, even leading into their career pathways, is in many instances going to look very different. So it is really important to understand the journey and those various touch points that we're able to connect to them.
And again, because journey mapping, I always find, so I love doing journey mapping activities, and it's like people do it. We do it a lot, but again, focusing in on maybe there's a specific audience that's really having trouble, or that you're noticing is dropping off or something like that. To be able to to pinpoint audiences using that journey map and following them along and we use social values for that. So based on that, I always just find the application of the social values adding that extra layer to those journey maps.
Yeah. So at the very early stages when they're considering, their next steps in terms of institution or program or whatever or course that they're going to look into and engage in. What's their goal? And what are those motivations and values kind of behind what they're looking for at those earlier stages? So how can you get in front of them in a way that's going to matter? And then as they're moving through the journey and doing the research, some people may do a lot of research, some people may not do much research at all. Right, the sponge learner is probably doing tons of research and be overwhelmed and probably end up with 15 different choices as to the types of courses or programs they want to apply to. But understanding all the various values and where they take place along the journey for those critical touch points is really important. It goes all the way to the very end, right? Because just because a student has finished a program at the institution doesn't mean they should be off the radar, right? There's still a lot of opportunity, particularly as alumni for advocacy, but people come back, right? Especially those lifelong learners. There's always the opportunity to keep re-engaging them and help them continue on their learning.
Well, it's different too like when we've done studies with target audiences and influencers as well. There's sometimes these gaps between what you think people want and versus what actually comes out, right? And because we're discovering these new the values and their motivations behind. We're looking at.
And we've done some work before too working with different schools, so different institutions, but also even the different programs within. And you actually do see very clear differences even at that level in terms of the types of values or learner mindset groups that you're attracting, right? So students going into the business stream look quite different than students who are kind of pursuing more a sciences pathway versus the humanity and arts. I just made up a new word. Humanity and arts also attracts a very specific type of learner mindset, right? So if you think back to the question that we had on the screen, you think about your favorite subject. Again, what made that your favorite subject? And maybe what are some of the values, the things that you hold dear and that are really, really important to you that might have been part of the reason that was your favorite subject.
What else was I?
Yeah, we had. We've also applied. So we do workshopping too, concept testing.
The workshopping.
Concept testing too. So again, really understanding the different learner groups that exist, the types of students you're hoping to attract to an organization really helps them craft, the types of messaging, the positioning of the institution, as well as the program, the campus, what have you. We've done a lot of testing around some of the positioning and concepts to really understand what resonates through the values lens.
For when you brought up workshopping, and that's what I was wanting to bring up was during workshops and actually seeing like when we're working with staff on like a professional development day or something, and when because social values are kind of so recognizable and you can connect with them so much, when they say, "Oh, I was with a dutiful accomplisher the other day," like, and they can start to actually pinpoint which values are with an actual human being, like an actual face that they saw the other day. That's the other great thing that I love about kind of applying these to those learner mindsets, because it really is something that you can really start to see.
And it's actually funny too, because it's not just understanding the student groups, where you can see the power of values at kind of profiling and helping you really understand the human beings. In some of the workshops that we've run, or some of the other work that we do, where we do incorporate some of our values segmentations. We have a fun quiz that we've gotten people to do before. You can find out what value segment you fall into, and we've run that with our stakeholders, right? With secondary stakeholders, and it's funny to find that birds of a feather flock together, or there's very clear, there's a very clear identity or brand around the institution already that is attracting a certain group of people, or maybe that certain group of people help shape it to become a background. It's a chicken and egg thing, but it is really interesting when you're like, oh, well, actually 70% are this group, and well, that makes a lot of sense when you understand what your institution's brand or that program is all about.
And when we did the social value or a segmentation of current students at an institution, it was kind of an interesting look because it was this one institution that we were working with had a super unique offering, something that wasn't necessarily appealing to everyone, but the people who it was appealing to were thriving and they were loving it. They were moving on to become ambassadors, but there was a few that maybe didn't make that connection. So we were really working to look at what those types were that are really thriving, and then how and what their needs were, what their motivations were, and then those who weren't necessarily thriving, what their needs and motivations are, and help that institution to develop communications, recruitment, and even student services and those types of things to be able to meet those needs. Also,
close the gap a little bit.
Close the gap a little bit. It helped them. Like one of those goals was kind of retention, right? We were seeing people dropping off or maybe not having their needs met or what they expected it to be. Yeah, so that was another interesting way that we also used it. What else? Sorry. Let's see what about.
I don't know. Should we open it up to questions, maybe?
Awesome. So if you have any questions about, we'll pick out a few questions once they start coming in. And then we can put Susan on the spot to answer them.
Well, you did take the first one, but you asked yourself, so yeah.
Okay, so it's your turn.
Yeah.
So if you want to send an example send a question to the chat and we can read them. We have a comment from Rachel. I love the example of different reasons why everyone might show up at a club or an event. If you assume everyone went to something for the same reason, you do a disservice to the diversity of the people from you.
Yes.
Yeah. Just gonna see if there's any questions that come in.
And we did some work where we were exploring the introduction of an initiative that was going to be rolled out, I think nationwide. So there was a need to understand the various student groups and expectations related to this specific offering, and recognizing that there were going to be different values behind their receptivity or their needs related to that offering, really helped to inform, what kind of broad-based program or offering needs to be developed, but then within that, what are the various ways that we might need to kind of tweak the messaging or positioning of that offering? What are the different kind of peripheral services or things that need to be attached to it that can address unique needs of different groups? But understanding the values and those deep underlying motivations behind various groups, receptivity and engagement and reactions to that conceptual offering was really critical.
And not just for a specific program or institution, like we've also in looking at different industries, why people go into specific industries or why people may be attracted to a specific field, right? And what values influence those decisions, maybe some perception gaps in what they're expecting from a job in industry X versus what they're getting, and maybe a reason that's deterring people from that, and it's based on their internal motivations, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think it's really important to highlight the the fact that while we're right now, this third session is really focused on the education space. There's the world and the decisions that we all make in life are informed by our values. And so when we leave, more the conventional education space, there's a lot of other things that we all engage in that are informed by our actual learner orientation, right? So in the arts and entertainment or tourism space, there are very specific groups that we've done work in film and cultural events and activities, as well as in travel and tourism, and there are distinct segments and groups within that where their engagement with that specific space you're offering, behind it there's a very kind of specific learner orientation around it too, right? Like, are they looking to really learn, expand their minds, and explore new things, new ideas, and those types of things? So it is really it's a really powerful.
It actually connects right to this question too. Can this approach be used to understand employment preferences? So like I was saying, so including interest in skilled trades. So we know skilled trades are in demand, but it's not for everybody. But why is that? Is it an awareness piece? Is it something that's just certain specific people may not be drawn to it, or they don't understand enough about it, and we're able to find those connections through their values to what does this industry bring that connects with what you're looking for in a career.
Right. So it actually does have a very key role to play in terms of understanding, career development, career pathways, whether it's in the trades or the other kinds of career pathways, and particularly when you understand the fact that it's very, very early on that people are already making these types of decisions, right? And so a lot of the lack of awareness, the misperceptions already are shaped beforehand. And so people are not going to be entering specific fields or taking on specific career paths or getting into programs or other kinds of things that are going to set them up for success and lead them into those career pathways with that gap in knowledge and understanding and awareness. And so it's very, very early on in their education. Doesn't have to be, when you're that 5-year-old, well, when I grow up, I want to be, it can be, but, in high school, even in middle school, right? And even earlier than that, you have, parents kind of shaping or whatever other kinds of activities the child is already being engaged in, is already kind of setting a little bit of a trajectory for where they might end up. So yes, it's not just fixed to the education space, but beyond it, whether it's your career, whether other things, values play a key role in understanding what you need to do to be able to engage and connect.
Awesome. I think we've got time for another one. How can we navigate changes with this generation of new students?
So again, it really is understanding the different mindset that exists out there, and because we're actually, this is focused on the education space, we're going to be talking about it from the different learner mindsets perspective. But this next generation, we have our Gen Z. We're going to be working soon on Gen Alpha when the time is right. But within each generational cohort, there are differences in values and motivations, right, that distinguish them from one another. And understanding the differences, but also the role that technology plays, right? So how do you create or develop your programs? Whether it's hybrid format, whether it's all entirely online, or however that needs to look, to be able to make sure that this next generation of students is going to be engaged in a way that makes sense based on their own realities and their own expectations, right? Because these are digital nomads, even more so the case, with Gen Alpha, and they are experiencing it's setting up their expectations for how they learn, how they see and understand the world, and what their expectations are. At everyone's fingertips now, we have ways of learning that don't even fall into the normal, right? The normal educational pathways. So you do have to recognize the impact that technology plays, as well as the other influence. There's so many more touch points of influence out there now beyond what was existing.
And not even just with like this new generation of students, I think with so many different learning opportunities, not even just for young people, but people old like myself can even go back.
Now you're making me feel really old.
But no, there's so many different ways of learning. There's so many different, I mean, our target audience isn't just kids coming up from high school and looking for a career, right? It's people, we're all learners, like I said at the beginning, right? There's so many different opportunities with things like micro-credentialing, online learning, and upskilling opportunities. And there's so many more options out there too. So how can we really continue to engage with learners of all types, right?
Yeah. Because now if you think about it, people, students can go a bit more down the conventional pathway with you taking an undergraduate or postgraduate program, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it is they're pursuing. But you can do it online, fully remotely. You can take things just Coursera or learn through those means too. So there's so much choice.
Yeah, public and private.
There's so many, right? There's so much choice available to them. So I think that's another thing to consider, is that in the positioning and development of the institution, the programming, the services, and those types of things, and the amenities, and other kind of more peripheral things, it's really critical to recognize that the competitive landscape is just so huge now, right? And it's not just what you think of when you think of education and schooling and what someone might choose amongst. You can learn through so many different avenues now.
We have time for one more. So, based on recent work, what industry trends are you noticing in the education space? So trends in education. So, you were just speaking about one that it comes to mind. So one thing is, like we were talking about, so student focused, student centric type institutions, really making sure that you're leading with students in mind first, right? And what better way? Like, it just, when those types of things come up, it's like, well, like understanding through a values lens is a really great way to do that, because we're finding out what do they need in their environment, what do they need to thrive. Other types of trends that we're noticing, have one and I lost my train of thought. Education.
I would say that the trends more so is that, again, I think I kind of referred to that earlier already, is that the digital component, we can't, that's going to become more and more so the case, even more with AI too, right? AI has not only a lot of implications for how students may be integrating that or utilizing that in their learning experience, but also, what are the types of, how can we build on AI to help set up the current generation of students for future success in future industries, future roles, future jobs.
One thing that came up for me, and linking it right to social values and this discussion, is what people want out of their careers is changing a lot. I think, like when we ask people or when we ask some maybe older generations, what do you think is important in a career versus younger generations, what do you think is important in a career? Like, we're seeing this a huge dichotomy basically of what people are looking for. And again, it is those values. People are looking for, of course, work-life balance, doing something where they can make a difference. But it's not just generational differences, it's also differences between the generations. So if one person is a specific segment within their cohort, they may be looking for something different in their career. But that's something that's come up in a couple of recent work that we've done.
I think students are increasingly looking for meaning. So meaningful education, meaningful learning. But the thing to understand is that what is meaningful to one is different for what's meaningful compared to what's meaningful to another group versus another group. So, one type of student might find meaning in community, connection, and kind of growing some kind of social a social aspect or something like that. That another one might find meaning in recognition and A+ or whatever. I don't know. There are a lot of different things that are meaningful. Another group might find meaning in being able to develop themselves, personally grow and mentor others, and then have some kind of positive impact in the world, in their community, in social groups. So a lot of different ways that people can find meaning, but more and more so, I think that the students nowadays are looking for a way to find meaning in their lives.
They're not just working to work. They're not just working to get paid. They want their work to mean something.
Yeah, and that education needs to be able to support that.
Okay. No questions, but thank you. This has been really insightful to listen to. Just thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in to the third episode.
And stay tuned for the next one.
Yes.
And I'm I never know where to point on these things.
To learn more about social values. Yeah, you can connect. If you can scan the QR code, you can connect with both Susan and I on LinkedIn. We have a lot of stuff happening there, and keep up to date on our next Social Values Compass episode. Thank you.